You're listening to 24/7 World Radio.
Continuing on with Jesuitism as described by Hollis. And we read here, continuing on, page 432. But what was the result? Did real Christianity make any progress there? That's in India. Did the angel bearing the good tidings find there any resting place for the sole of her foot? Or was it simply a demonstration of Jesuitism, a gigantic attempt to counterfeit Christianity, to forestall the rising missionary spirit of the 17th century, and to monopolize the great missionary field of the East, which was now fast passing into the hands of a great Protestant nation, and I will say a great white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation of Great Britain? Well may it be said, Satan's seat is there. Nowhere else has he such vast multitudes of immortal souls bound hand and foot to the chains of an ancient, long venerated, long controlling system of false religion. Christianity, now renovated and energized by the Reformation, that's the Protestant Reformation, was about to take wings for her flight over the nations. It was to forestall the approaching invasions of the religion of Calvary, sacrilegiously to baptize the followers of Brahma in the name of Christ, yet preserve unimpaired the spirit of the arch foe, the devil, that the Jesuits were inspired to make this bold and desperate attempt to anticipate and foil the labors of the coming ambassadors of the cross. And those to be the British Protestants and Baptists. Yeah. And for a time they seemed to prosper, but the day of inquisition came. The strong man armed kept his goods till a stronger than he came and took away the armor wherein he trusted. The Jesuits lost their power. The order was suppressed. Then what became of Madura Christians and of the bold experiment in India? Only 20 years had elapsed, and these native Christians are described by the Romish writer Fra Bartolomeo as, quote, being in the lowest state of superstition and ignorance, unquote. The account he gives of their morals, especially of the catechists and native clergy, is literally too gross for transcription, unquote. The evidence of the Abbé Dubois, another Romish authority, is not a whit more favorable. In his celebrated letters are to be found instances of superstitions and ignorance scarcely exceeded even in the reign of the Jesuits, and he makes the rightful admission that, quote, during a period of 20 years, in italics, that he had familiarly conversed with them, lived with them as their religious teacher and spiritual guide, unquote, he would, quote, hardly dare affirm that he had anywhere, in italics, met one sincere and undisguised Christian, unquote. While Jesuitism failed to scatter in that benighted land the seeds of a pure Christianity, or to make disciples of Jesus, it worked out a purpose and providence which we would not overlook. I want you to see this, how God is working this to fulfill his counsel. He's working the design of Satan with his servants, the Jesuits, to fulfill his counsel. Just like he's working the design of Satan with his Jesuits and the Jesuit jab to fulfill his counsel for the salvation of his elect. He's working all things after his counsel of his will, Ephesians 1:11. We can never forget that. We read, while Jesuitism failed to scatter in that benighted land the seeds of a pure Christianity, or to make disciples of Jesus, it worked out a purpose and providence which we would not overlook. It showed up in the real animus of Jesuitism more distinctly than ever had been before. Its power, its unscrupulous policy, its disregard of the most solemn oaths and of all moral obligations where the interests of their society or of the church demanded, its avarice, its ambition, and intolerance all found the most unrestrained development in this propitious field. We may accept this as the masterpiece of that wisdom which worketh among the children of disobedience. Of course, Satan's wisdom. And the illustration is not the less striking of the singular devotedness and sacrifice and self-denial and unfaltering perseverance of these devotees of Loyola. How much more ought the true disciple of Jesus, who has been bought with an infinite price, saved by the blood divine, to make a full and unreserved consecration to his divine Lord and Master. Go anywhere, do anything, make any sacrifice. Amen, Brother Hollis. We have reproduced the above brief sketch of Jesuitism as an example, though an incomplete one, of what this order really is. But has not Jesuitism changed with the progress of civilization and the advancement of Christianity? We have not the slightest ground for such a suspicion. Like the papacy, it changes not. There's a Latin phrase which means always the same. What semper idem, I believe. Always the same. Never changes. Never, we believe, had these wily, ever-aggressive Janissaries of Rome. Remember, Janissaries were the foremost warriors for Islam at the height of the Ottoman Empire. And they were kidnapped white boys brought into Baghdad, the center of Islam, to be made the most powerful, greatest warriors of Islam. They're called the Janissaries. And so the Jesuits are called by Hollis Reed the Janissaries of the Pope, and indeed they are. He writes, never, we believe, had these wily, ever-aggressive Janissaries of Rome a more open field, or were they more on the alert of activity than at the present moment in America. This is 1856. By this time, they're inciting the anti-slavery agitation and get ready to incite the war between the states, or the war of northern aggression. Never more than now was the Jesuit, quote, going about seeking whom he may devour. I would imagine the Protestants of the South. Never had his power been less limited or unrestrained than in our own free country. I would add of America. So Hollis Reed tells us in 1856 that the power of the Jesuits is unrestrained under the guise of the protection of the First Amendment, which that Baptist First Amendment was never intended to protect the Jesuits. It only protects religious worship. It doesn't protect those masquerading as Christians to foment and foster a revolution for the overthrow of the very government that they claim its protection of. Continuing. Like the frogs of Egypt, the Jesuits are in our houses, in our bedchambers, in our kitchens and kneading troughs, in our schools and colleges, in our churches and legislatures. They have not lost one iota of their cunning, adroitness, and exhaustless activity. They will go anywhere, will do anything, submit to any sacrifice, be anything which may seem best to subserve their own interests. And what are these interests? Just what they always were: to gain power, to control the destinies of the nation, to bring all men into abject subjection to the despotism of Rome. to monopolize talent, money, position, to enslave the people and exalt the hierarchy. It is to turn back the dial of time 1,000 years, to arrest the progress of civilization and of civil and religious liberty, and to restore the world to Rome's millennial glory in the darkest days of the Dark Ages. In the great work Romanism, the history of Romanism, by that great minister of the gospel, he writes, during the Dark Ages, it was the meridian of papal power. It was the meridian noonday of papal power. History of Romanism, written in 1845. And that's where the Jesuits want to throw us back to. They want to throw us back to the Pope's Dark Ages. To do that, they have to destroy the white Anglo-Saxon nations and people. They have to overthrow the English language and substitute French or Spanish for it or something like that. They have to get rid of our borders, of our national borders that we once had as white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nations. They have to monopolize our education, which they've done. They have to monopolize the money, which they have done. They have to take gold and silver away from us, which they've done. They have to replace our Reformation Bibles with counterfeit Bibles, which they've done. They have to unite churches and state and the military government together, which they've done with 501c3 churches. They've done all this. And now, what's left is what's in some preceding pages. We now have finished Hollis Reed's little portion on the Jesuits. I want to go to a previous chapter and show you what they have done when they come to power. We read concerning the Jesuits when they come to power. On page 409, we read, when we consider that the Church of Rome claims to have a religion based on divine revelation, her efforts and arguments to prevent the reading and circulation of the Bible are so absurd that they would never have been thought of if there had not been some sinister ends to accomplish. Remember, this was accomplished in our country in 1963 with the decision of the Warren Court, Earl Warren being a high-level 33rd degree Freemason. Quote, no man is displeased that others should enjoy the light of the sun unless he is engaged in some design which it is his interest that others should not see. And in this case, he would wish the gloom of midnight to sit down upon the earth, that he might practice his nefarious deeds with impunity. It is an interest contrary to the Scriptures, which has impelled the Church of Rome to exert her power to hinder the circulation. Unquote. This well confirms the conclusion of a grave Romish writer who says, it is manifest by experience that if the use of the Bible be permitted in the vulgar tongue, more evil than profit will result. It is for this reason the Bible is prohibited with all its parts, whether printed or written, in whatsoever vulgar language, also all summaries and abridgments. Unquote. Especially the Geneva Bible with all of its notes. So the papacy hated that one. Continuing, the following incident is believed to be no more than a fair example of the hatred of the Romish priest to the Bible and to the demonstration of his aversion when circumstances will allow. A priest was called to perform extreme unction for a man in Ceylon who was near his end. On entering the house, he saw a book on the shelf and inquired what it was. When told it was a New Testament, he took it down, tore it to pieces, and trampled it under his feet. Remember the story I read to you years ago and how the priest came to Charles Chinneky's house as he was a young boy with his mother, and he found the Bible there. And he ultimately told they're not allowed to read it. And his father told the priest to leave. Ultimately, the Bible will then disappear. The papacy hates the Reformation Bible in the common tongue of mankind. As a shrewd writer on the papacy well says, quote, they are afraid to put the Bible in any shape into the hands of the people, lest it should disclose their secret abominations. It is not the Protestant translation that is feared, but the Bible. As touching the Bible and its general use, we commend our Roman Catholic friends to the opinion and practice of the great St. Patrick of Ireland. By the way, St. Patrick was a Baptist. Quote, the record says, quote, he was a great reader and lover of the Bible. He left only 2 short compositions, but in them he makes 43 distinct quotations from the Holy Scriptures, and throughout his writings, his phraseology is scriptural, showing that the Bible was his daily companion for perusal and meditation. This is St. Patrick's Day in New York City, where all the Catholics are marching down the main avenue there. St. Patrick was a Baptist. He was no Roman Catholic. Never forget the day my teacher, Rembert Carter, in history in Baptist Bible College, told us that St. Patrick was a Baptist. The papacy has again identified himself with systems of paganism, and the fact that she is a persecuting church, in italics. Pagan Rome put men to death by myriads simply because they were Christians. Papal Rome has put millions of Christians to death because they were not pagans. Or Romanists, I would add. In nothing, perhaps, is Rome more distinctly characterized than in that of being a persecuting church. No history has recorded the number of her victims. Intolerance has not only stood out as an ugly excrescence, but it has from the first been the animating spirit of that huge body. From the very nature of the case, full statistics of numbers are not to be found, but there, I will tell you, they're in the Vatican Library. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's when we attack Italy with my Calvinistic army and we conquer Rome. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the Vatican Library with our scholars and we're going to start tearing apart all those old records. Wouldn't that be lovely? Yeah. Thousands upon thousands, of whom the world was not worthy, disappeared, were immured in prisons, starved, tortured, and either left to die or secretly murdered, and no record remains. Kind of like the Gulag in Russia for 100 years, because the Jesuits ran the Gulag archipelago. Yeah. Even Solzhenitsyn calls them our medieval torturers in his great work. According to the calculations of some, about 200,000 Christian Protestants suffered death in 7 years under Pope Julian. Pope Julian was known as a warrior pope. No less than 100,000 were massacred by the French in the space of 3 months. Those were he goes on. I maintain those were the French Huguenots. Waldenses who perished amounted to 1 million. Ever heard that before? The Waldensians that perished were 1 million. The hands of Rome. Within 30 years, the Jesuits destroyed 900,000. That has to be a reference to the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648. 900,000, nearly a million. Under the Duke of Alva, he invaded the Netherlands now to reduce those reformed people to serving that tyrannical king of Spain, Philip II. Under the Duke of Alva, 26,000 were executed by the hangman. That's when they invaded the Netherlands with the monk Titelman, head of the Inquisition. 159,000 by the Irish massacre. Well, it was more than that. It was more like 300,000, according to my other sources. And this Irish massacre had continued for 8 years, from 1642 to 1649, till Cromwell went up there and put an end to it. Thank God for Oliver Cromwell. They cry and moan about Drogheda, and about Wexford. They cry about Cromwell taking those two cities, but never once about the hundreds of thousands of those poor Irish Protestants that were murdered by the Jesuits and the O'Neill family when they started the Irish massacre, that it would run for 8 years. No mention about that. That's okay. Isn't it, fanatic Irish Catholic? Besides, the vast multitude of whom the world could never be particularly informed, who were proscribed, starved, burnt, assassinated, chained to the galleys for life, immured within the walls of the Bastille, that's the French Bastille, which was destroyed during the French Revolution, thank God, or others of their church and state prisons. Remember, the French Revolution was the Jesuit punishment of the Dominicans in the papacy for the suppression of the order by Pope Clement XIV. That's why the Jacobins and the French Revolutionists burned down the Bastille. That's why Napoleon captured the Pope and took him over the Alps where he died. That's Pius VI. That's why there was a continual persecution of the papacy by the French Revolution and Napoleon. That's why Napoleon takes the crown away out of the hands of the Pope and puts it on his own hand. The Jesuits were punishing the papacy for their suppression by Pope Clement XIV, and that's how we must understand the French Revolution and Napoleon Bonaparte. Robespierre on horseback. Continuing. According to some, the whole number of persons massacred since the rise of the papacy, including the space of 1400 years, amounts to 15 million. Well, I have another work by Paul Burt that tells you that the Inquisition, from about 1215, thereabouts, to 1808, killed 68 million. Remember, the Holy Office was in all the countries where the papacy ruled. Central America, South America, India, all throughout Europe, China. The Inquisition was there. You must read the work. H.C. Leah's work on the history of the Inquisition is 2 volumes. Get it, read it, and weep. Rome has never failed when she had the power to make good her claim to the prophetic title affixed to her, a, quote, woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, unquote. Intolerance is her very life and soul. By fire and by sword, she has sought to extirpate from the earth. That is a phrase out of the Jesuit fourth vow. To extirpate from the earth all who dared raise the banner of freedom or resist her spiritual despotism. Quote, the valleys of Piedmont and Switzerland, the sunny plains of France and Holland, the hills of Scotland, and the meadows of England. Have been made fat with the blood of countless martyrs who have been sacrificed by the ambition of papal power, unquote. And Rome never changes. Indeed, we may in all truth say the devil is nowhere so completely at home, so congenially acting out his innermost soul as in the work of religious persecution. Before the burning fact that stands as the undeniable blot on the page of history, we could not believe that men, in italics, could ever become so completely divested of every feature of a decent manhood, could so assume the nature and garb of that archdemon. Though clad in priestly robes, quote, the livery of heaven, unquote, as to instigate and stand by and witness tortures inflicted on their kindred according to the flesh, more cruel, more barbarous than the various savages ever thought of. And all this for no other crime than that of reading the Bible and worshiping God according to the dictates of their own consciences. Men, as men, never surrendered themselves up to a work so completely devilish. This whole work of religious persecution is the foulest incarnation of the pit, capital P. It would now seem almost unnecessary to say that the papacy resembles the old pagan systems in the practice of idolatry, in italics. We have spoken of the worship of saints and angels, the deification after the manner of the heathen, of heroes, the worship of the Virgin in like manner as the heathen worship their goddess. We meet at every turn and corner in papal countries. Like in Mexico, they have what's called the Day of the Dead. It's a march throughout the city of New Mexico, of the capital of Mexico City, the Day of the Dead. We meet at every turn and corner of papal countries, pictures, images, relics, the cross, and all sorts of emblems of idolatry. In judging of the idolatrous character of Rome papal, we must have regard to the surroundings. In a country like ours, Romanism is one thing. It appears shorn of much of its deformity, especially of its grosser idolatry. Rome stands forth simply as one of the different forms of the prevalent idolatry of the land. The suppression, for a time, in a Christian land, of her real character is simply a temporary and temporizing policy. Where Rome exists in heathen countries, she practices no such reserves and deceptions. She appears and acts out herself. In illustration of this, and as showing up Romanism in its real character, we may cite instances.
This is 24/7 World Radio, and you're listening to The Eric John Phelps Show.
This is Brother Nicholas. Join me every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the German Bible Truth Hour and at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Dutch Bible Truth Hour on 24/7 World Radio. This is Bruder Nicholas. Ich lade euch herzlich ein, mich anzuhören, jeder Dienstag um 2 Uhr nachmittags, amerikanische Zeit, für die deutsche Bibelwahrheitsstunde und 3 Uhr amerikanische Standardzeit für die niederländische Bibelwahrheitsstunde am World Radio 24/7. Dit is broeder Nico. U bent hartelijk uitgenodigd om elke dinsdag om 2 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Duitse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen en 3 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Nederlandse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen op 24/7 World Radio.
This is The Eric John Phelps Show on 24/7 World Radio.
Now page 413. Of the papacy, and that it never changes, and it always persecutes, and is coming to its final manifestation under some new system, as Hollis speaks of in 1856, and that new system would be communism. To bring the world under a communism, then to be openly resisted by the final Pope of Rome under the new rite. It appears to be universal fascist resistance to the communism that the Jesuit papacy has imposed on the world. It seems to that end, at least to me. We go on, and we read. Talks about the similarity of idolatry and Romanism. And he continues on. And he says on page 414, the Romish priest, as he wakes up in a heathen land and in the chambers of her imagery, unquote, is astonished to meet objects and to witness rites and observances which have been to him from his youth familiar as household words. The heathen man, on the other hand, comes to Rome, and not the less wonders that these modern idolaters have so faithfully preserved the image and superscription, yea, the life and spirit of the old idolatry. The following testimony of a Chinese missionary more than confirms all we have said. We transcribe a paragraph. Quote, when I was compelled, unquote, says Reverend Mr. Smith, quote, to observe the details of these idolatrous ceremonies, I could not fail to be impressed with the striking similarity of the rites of Buddha with those of popery. No unsophisticated mind, no more ordinary observer could mingle in the scenes which I witnessed in those temples. No one could be transferred from this country to be an eyewitness of those Buddhist ceremonies and superscription without being for the moment impressed with the idea. That which he saw was nothing else than Roman Catholicism in China. Would that those who show an unhappy zeal in the maintenance of the ceremonies of the Church of Rome could be transferred to this heathen land and there see how closely paganism assimilates with Romanism and how intimately Romanism assimilates with paganism. Exclamation point. Let not the same institutions, the same ceremonies, the same rites in the same one as is in the other. There is the monastery, celibacy, the dress and caps of the priests, the incense, the bells, the rosary of beads, the lighted candles of the altar, the same intonation of the services, the same idea of purgatory, the praying as in an unknown tongue, the offerings as departed spirits in the temple, and the same in the Buddhist temples of China as in the Roman Catholic churches of Europe. And what is still more remarkable, and at the same time shows a melancholy resemblance between the two religions, the principal female god of the Chinese, the goddess of mercy, has also the title of Xing Mu, meaning Holy Mother, and Tin Ho, which means Queen of Heaven, and which is still more remarkable, she is always represented by the image of a woman bearing a male child in her arms. And this is proven in Two Babylons by Hislop. In fact, the whole system of Buddhist worship as carried on in China presents such a strong resemblance to that of the Church of Rome that an early Jesuit missionary who visited China declared that Buddhism must have been the invention of Satan himself to retard the progress of Christianity by showing its striking similarity with the Buddhist worship. Which is the original and which the imitation Roman? Which is the original and which the imitation, Romanism or Buddhism? Asked Bishop Kingsley in his record of his late travels to the East. Read the following paragraph and possibly your decision will be in favor of Buddhism as the original. He goes on. Quote, on this mountain, which is ascended by thousands of stone steps, is a Buddhist monastery and temples with all the appliances for this form of idolatrous worship. Here is a great number of Buddhist priests who live in a state of celibacy. Don't you ever believe any man is living in a state of celibacy. Only suckers believe that. They're busy having sex somewhere, somehow. Going on. Here is a great number of Buddhist priests who live in a state of celibacy and look and act and worship so much like Roman Catholic priests that one might be very easily mistaken for the other. Whether the Romanists learned the mummeries from the Buddhists or the Buddhists from the Romanists, it is morally certain that the great many points of resemblance that they had a common origin. Yeah, Babylon. Long wax candles were burning before them, and one of them was burning incense. These priests live an austere life, refrain from animal food, believe in purgatory, pray for the dead, and live a life of mendicancy. That means they don't have anything. Adjoining this great temple is the temple of the goddess of mercy. One of the idols in this has 36 hands, 18 on each side. Directly in front of this is an image of a Chinese woman, and on similar side a great number of smaller idols. By the way, these 36 hands, there are 36 points in the Jesuit general seal. They have the point, and then the male, female, male, female. There's 32 around the circle, and there are 4 inside the circle, 36 points. And when you add arithmetically, 1 plus 1 is 2, and then the next number is 2, then 2 plus 2 is 4, and then the next number is 3, 4 plus 3 is 7. You do that, you come up with 666, common to then Buddhism as well as Jesuitism, with their use of the number 36. Going on. Directly in front of this is an image of a Chinese woman, and on either side a great number of similar idols. In the mirror we have been holding up, we have seen the image of the old paganism reflected in all its essential features, yet so modified and changed in name, so adopted to the change of times and the progress of the world, and more especially to the progress of the true religion, as to exhibit it as a consummate scheme of diabolism, to counteract the benevolent purposes of God for the salvation of men, and to establish the empire of Satan over the apostate world. Whether this shall prove the final great counterfeit, the summation on earth of the infernal machinations of his satanic majesty, to subvert the divine scheme for the restoration of man and to achieve the ruin of our race, or whether we shall look for another revelation of the quote-unquote mystery of iniquity, of the quote deceivableness of unrighteousness, unquote, a scheme yet more subtle, seductive, and dangerous, because assuming yet more of the guise of the true religion, we affirm not, yet it would seem, but analogous with the past, to suppose that there yet remains to be revealed another phase of the man of sin, or the man of sin, the final manifestation in relation to which all the preceding dispensations of the devil were but preparatory to the dreadful consummation. So now Hollis Reed is putting forth the possibility that there's another system that will be introduced. And he's writing this in 1856, and I maintain that system is communism. And communism is Jesuitism. And it will swallow up Buddhism in China. It will swallow up the Orthodox Church in Russia. It will swallow up America with its military government. It will swallow up all of our academic institutions. It will swallow up Canada. It will swallow up China. It will swallow up Africa. It will swallow up India. It's going to swallow up everything. Jesuitism is communism. And it's not Jewish. It's Jesuit. And there are certain upfront Jews that helped popularize it. But let's read more what Hollis Reed has to say here. Page 417. There is some ground to satisfy such a surmise. Romanism is effete or weak, like effeminate. Its idolatry is too gross for the age. Its rites and superstitions belong to a darker age. The world has advanced, knowledge has increased, civilization has made decided progress, and liberty has given unmistakable tokens that ere long she will unfurl her banners over every nation on the face of the earth. And more than all, the religion of the New Testament has made notable advance. This is the 1800s. This is when you have modern missions, okay? With the gospel being taken to the ends of the earth and the Jesuit order suppressed. Hence, as the Oriental nations have outgrown the paganism of bygone ages, so have the Western nations become too enlightened and free much longer to tolerate the semi-paganism of Rome. Hence, our arch foe, Satan, seems shut up to a corresponding change of tactics and of his mode of warfare. Rome is still strong, mighty in her munitions and strongholds to carry on the warfare under the old regime, but no more suited to the state of the world than old imperial Rome would be, were she to attempt to cope with modern France or England. She would have the power, but not the adaptedness, the appliances. This is intriguing to me. This reasoning. Continuing. Rome must change her tactics, put on the modern armor, and the same is yet more true of the religion of Mecca and of the pagan nations of Asia. They lack the same adaptedness to the times. They sure do. So they must be united by Freemasonry, controlled by the Jesuits, and they must wage war for the annihilation of targeted populations that are preventing the unification of nations under the oversight of the Pope of Rome. Remember, the Pope is in control of Davos. The Pope is in control of the World Economic Forum. He's in control of all these things, and he's advocating liberalism and modernism, that nations have to give up their sovereignty, and we're having all this climate change, and we have to give up our modern means of locomotion, and blah, 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 blah. In his unifying attempts to unite all the peoples with their religions under some sort of super government, super philosophy, which in the end is really a communism, a communalism. We're all in this together bit. A destruction of nationalism and any people that want to promote nationalism. Going on. Rome must change her tactics. Hence we infer that the devil will change his tactics and his whole mode of warfare, that another great antichrist Christian power shall arise, emanating out of the mouth of the dragon and of the beast and of the false prophet, more formidable because more subtle, more like Christianity in form and pretense, yet more unlike in spirit and essence, a baptized form of modern skepticism and an infidelity, bearing the name of Christ and professing to be especially a church for the times, yet more essentially antichrist than the present Romish apostasy. The beast without his horns, the dragon with all his fierceness and malignity and eagerness to devour, yet clad in the guise of the Lamb, and the false prophet robed in the vestments of the high priest of Christianity, yet with all the intolerance of the arch-Turk. End of chapter, page 418. This is the unification of mankind, of the nations, as the Jesuits with their Jesuit Pope are pushing for now. If you can deny that he is the most powerful man in the world, if you can deny that the Muslim leaders make their regular treks to Rome to have audiences with the Pope, if you can deny that the Orthodox leaders do, if you can deny that the Protestant leaders do, if you can deny that the Africans do. There were 156 heads of state at the funeral of John Paul II. Were they all Catholics? Of course not. Jesuitism in its satanic wisdom creates both sides of a controversy, the East versus the West, communism versus fascism, to control the synthesis. And the synthesis is the unification of all nations under the power of the final Pope of Rome, who will, after the appearance of Christ for the remnants of his church still living, will then institute the 70th week of Daniel, when he will confirm a covenant with many nations for 7 years. Remember, the United Nations has a treaty with Jerusalem for its protection. And remember that the Temple Mount in Jerusalem was deeded to the Pope in 1993 by Yossi Belan and Shimon Peres, while Peres, that Jesuit, was in Oslo. It's all going there. The final Pope of Rome having an international treaty for 7 years that will protect Jerusalem. Beginning the 70th week of Daniel, I don't know which day, on that very day, the two prophets, Moses and Elijah, will be on the streets of Jerusalem preaching repentance to the nation of Israel, to believe on Jesus Christ, and anybody who wants to kill them, fire will proceed out of their mouths and devour them. The Jesuits will not be able to kill Moses and Elijah when they come back. And it's coming. I've reviewed to you the essential elements of Jesuitism, of their end game, of their persecutions, which should impel us now, us white men, us white Anglo-Saxon Celts, Protestants and Baptists, to call for our own nation somewhere here in North America, because this empire is finished. If we're going to have our own nation, we have to be healthy. And this is how I'm going to devote the last 10 minutes of this broadcast to our personal health as white men. We white men have become fat, dumpy, obese, gluttons, lazy, ignorant of our history and of the greatness of our people and what was accomplished during the Reformation and the founding of our country, now usurped by the papacy with its military government in Washington District of Catholics. Therefore, we need to begin to take care of our health. We need to seriously spend time on our health. And I've been doing this for the past couple of weeks. And I've decided that I'm not going to eat unless I'm hungry. And I've lost 10 pounds. I weigh now 170. I haven't weighed 170 since I was in high school. But I've lost a lot of fat. The next thing I had to do is, because I have a prostate problem. I have a swollen prostate. I decided I've had enough of that. All the supplements in the world are not going to do anything. Whenever you have any kind of inflammation, white men, in your body, whether it's a swollen prostate or others, it's because of infection and an acid state and low oxygen. So therefore, we have to alkalize our body. And thanks to Brother Abram Horner, who taught me much about the use of baking soda, I decided to spend the night over here last night at my church building. And I just got in the tub. It doesn't have to be boiling hot water, just hot enough to open your pores. I put sea salt in there. I put magnesium malate in there, like 4 tablespoons of each, and also Arm & Hammer baking soda, 4 tablespoons of that. Swish it all together, mix it all up, and I laid in that for an hour. And all of that alkalinity is going into your system, going into your pores. And when that alkaline substance is hitting the acidic infection, it beats down that infection. Infection cannot prosper in an alkaline state. Cancer cannot prosper in an alkaline state. Heart disease cannot prosper in an alkaline state. When you're acidic and you have inflammation in your arteries, the body sends calcium there to try to stop the inflammation, and now you have plaque buildup. So therefore, I decided that I'm going to do it again this morning. And when I did it again this morning, that specific bath, I have not been able to stand up or sit down without agonizing back pain for probably 2 years. It's gone. Gone. I didn't get up last night to urinate. That's the first time that's happened in over probably 2 years. You used to get up 2-3 times a night to urinate. That's a swollen prostate. Didn't happen last night. I recommend that we soak, white men, in baths with magnesium malate, sea salt, and sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, at least 3 times a week. To go into and alkalize our body, to beat back the inflamed acidic state that we all have. Changing your diet's not going to get rid of your low back pain. You've got to get rid of it through alkalizing. Now, when you alkalize, then you want to take your Modere product of BioCell, which is the collagen, so you can rebuild your joints, because these pathogens and infections have attacked our joints, and hence you have bone on bone, some of you, and you're now going to go for hip replacement and a host of other things. Or because you're acidic, you're going to have osteoporosis, and then you're going to fall, you're going to break your hip. We've got to get our acidity down, so I recommend you do these soaks. Next thing is, you need to have a special drink. And it's a special alkalizing drink that attacks pathogens in our system. Now, I believe that we have friendly viruses that our body makes as cleanup, but I believe there are unfriendly viruses that are foreign that hurt us and that are contagious. I believe that. So therefore, we're going to go after these foreign viruses that are positively charged. We're going to go after these foreign bacteria, these foreign funguses. We're going to do our soaks, and then we're going to drink this. Now, I want you to write this down. First thing in the morning, you're going to have a glass of water. I prefer distilled or RO, but it's got to be your special water. Add 4 drops of grapefruit seed extract. It's also called citrucidal. 4 drops in the glass. Very, very anti-pathogen. I used to take 200 drops at a time in a mix. It tastes terrible. So put 4 drops in the water. Then you're going to put a quarter of a teaspoon, just a quarter of a teaspoon of a sea salt. I like Celtic sea salt. I think it's the best. But use a sea salt, a quarter teaspoon. Then you're going to use a quarter teaspoon at the most of magnesium malate or magnesium chloride. Either one will do. And then you're going to put a quarter teaspoon of your sodium bicarbonate, your baking soda. And you mix that up. And then you put about a teaspoon of maple syrup in that. It'll make it more palatable. Plus, when the cancer cells that we all have sense the maple syrup, they're going to open up to take in the sugar. And when they do that, the sea salt, the sodium bicarbonate, the magnesium malate, which is highly alkaline, is going to go inside those cells and kill the cell. That's going to be apoptosis, is what the doctors call it. So this drink will alkalize you from the inside. It will kill cancer cells on the inside, and it will also work in conjunction with your soaks. I challenge you. It's very inexpensive. Just try it. Have this little drink in the morning. You can take it 3 times a week. I'd take it every day for about the next 3 months. You want to get this all neutralized out of you. And then as the infection goes down, watch how your appetite decreases. Infection always raises appetite. And remember, you want to keep yourself hydrated. So you want to drink your water, but you also want to drink Apex water. Now, I can't really afford my monthly quota to order that stuff. So go online, go to APEX-water, WATER.com. You go to that site, that website, it will come up. You can watch a video by Victoria. She will explain how it works. And it is oxygen singlets bound to silver nanoparticles. There is no hydrogen in it. You cannot freeze it. You cannot boil it. If you do, you will wreck it. And you take this special Apex water that's anti-pathogen, pardon me, in conjunction with what we're doing with these other 2 things. Your inflammation is going to gradually deteriorate. Your infections are going down. You need to take artery care that will start to pull your toxins out of your system. It's called artery care. Just go online. It will pull out the calcium buildup, pardon me. So the artery care will pull out calcium buildup so you don't have to get chelated. The Apex water will kill down your infections, and it has reversed leukemia. Take your soaks. Have your special morning drink, your alkaline drink, and watch how your aches and pains begin to disappear, and your prostate, man, is going to shrink back to normal. That's what's happened to me. And I'm not giving any legal advice. I'm giving equitable advice. Amen. This is equity. That which is fair, just, and right. Well, I trust you enjoyed the broadcast for today. I trust it was helpful to you, and may the Lord bless you as you do as well, as we meet to worship Him on this Lord's Day. And Lord willing, I'll be with you on next Monday. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. So until then, Maranatha, the Lord bless you.